Hi there. My name's Cindy Davis. I'm the content director for AV Technology, and with me is Aaron Kipfer, Chief Technology Officer at Neoti. And we're here to talk about Virtual Studio, also known as XR, and I can't wait to talk about it because it's just such a cool topic. So, Aaron, uh, Neoti is very well known in the broadcast industries, but some of our Pro AV audience might not be quite as aware of your brand. So, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of an overview, that'd be great.
Sure. Neoti's been around since 2006, and we really dived deep into LED in about 2014, 2015, into producing LED product. We started by producing product for the broadcast space because we knew as a new manufacturer coming into the space against much larger brands that have been around for much longer, we needed to prove ourselves in the quality of product, in our turnaround times, and our service and support, kind of all of those areas. And we felt like the best way to do that was in the broadcast space because it's mission critical displays that are on for TV studios, TV broadcasts. They're on camera, which obviously produces its own set of issues or challenges that need to be overcome. So all of those things combined, we felt like if we're going to break into this space as a newcomer to the space at the time, then we were going to have to do it in the best way possible with the best quality possible, which is why we started in the broadcast space. And now we're starting to develop more and more product outside of this space, to target commercial, retail, education, those kind of things.
Cool. So all the trade shows that we've been going to in the past, well, when they've been around, the past couple of years, we've been seeing a lot of virtual studios. And, I thought it was kind of interesting because you mentioned broadcasts, and it's like, okay, well, how does this really fit into the Pro AV space? So tell me a little bit about that, and then we'll get into really what virtual studio is.
Sure. Well, as you said, almost every trade show that you go to, NAB, ISE, Infocom, et cetera, all of the LED manufacturers are basically touting their version of a virtual set or an XR studio or some sort of flavor of that. And really all it means is that it's just what used to be green screen is now being replaced with LED technology, which allows for a lot of different things, which we can go into. But how that applies to once we get into the commercial space, or even the education sector or other areas outside of broadcast or outside of Hollywood, is that now we can take spaces that weren't active, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. But now that all these companies are starting to really get more into online video creation or Zoom calls, such as this, people are wanting more and more to create spaces that aren't just generic backdrops or aren't just simple green screen features or things like that. They're wanting more than filters, and so with LED walls, what you can do is produce backdrops that can change with the environment, that can provide lighting and other effects that will really enhance any kind of video production, whether it's a simple Zoom call or an education space that's trying to create recruitment videos or anything like that.
Pretty cool. So virtual studio and XR, are those really interchangeable?
Yeah, they really are. Much like everything in this industry, once one manufacturer says one thing, or really one reporter says one thing, everybody kind of runs with that till the end of time until somebody creates a new term for it, and then they run with that for a while. So yeah, XR and virtual studios are basically the same type of thing. They just mean that it's some sort of a virtual reality studio. XR just means it's mixed media, so it could have some elements of real pieces, but most of it is virtually created.
So talk about some of the applications that the Pro AV audience might see themselves developing.
Yeah. So most, as I started to mention before, most spaces are starting to come up with their own small little production studios without really calling them, broadcast studios or anything like that. They're filling office spaces, or they're filling conference room with backdrops that are one-sided, simple, LED walls, or three-sided LED walls. Some of them are adding floors, some of them are adding ceilings, all depending on what type of elements they need in that space. And so you even see companies like, large companies that are product-based companies like Amazon and Walmart and some of these others that are producing content now that they weren't producing 5 years ago. So they're producing content for individual products. They're producing lifestyle videos for products to help, shoot them out on social media or wherever. And so some of these things, they may want to show somebody carrying a handbag in Paris, but they don't want to fly a whole crew to Paris to take this video. Now they can produce Paris right in a 10 by 10 space, which, opens up a whole wealth of, possibilities for what type of content they can produce and where they can do it. They can do it in a much smaller environment, close to home, in the same building, with the same people. It just kind of simplifies the whole process.
That's pretty cool. So paint the whole picture for me, if you would. So
Yeah,
let's take a corporate office, for instance. You mentioned,
sure.
three walls and the
Yeah,
floor. So what are the elements that are needed? The video wall. There's the
right.
cameras. There's the content. So there's quite a few pieces that need to come together there.
Sure. Well, in traditional setups, you would have, a green screen or a blue screen or whatever. And then once all of the videos and cameras and the lighting and everything were placed into the space, they would, producers would create the content, and then they would, and without any kind of backdrop, without any kind of, additional like ambient lighting or anything like that, they would shoot it to post edit, and post edit would actually create all of the space outside of the actor itself. And so that would take time, and the engines that they were using, or the software and the hardware that they were using, are much the same for doing it post edit as doing it in real life with LED walls. And so you're right. Basically, you have your LED wall in the simplest of forms. You have the LED wall. You have the controller, which controls the LED wall, which is just part of that system. And then you have your cameras that are shooting the talent. But then driving the LED wall is the most important part, because you have to have some sort of content on it. And so you can't just put a PowerPoint up there. You can, but you may not get the effect that you want. And so many times what's happening are there are engines out there that are many of them are coming from the video game industry, where they're so used to creating all of these integrated 3D spaces, all these worlds that just didn't exist for video games. Now people are finding ways to produce that same type of content, that same type of 3D environments, and projecting them basically onto LED walls, and using that same technology, the same type of software, the same type of hardware that we've always used, that's just getting better and better. And now they're using it to create the spaces on the LED wall. And then you have things like camera tracking, which allow you to take that 3D space, and as you're moving your physical camera around the actor or the talent that you're shooting, the environment behind the talent moves and shifts and morphs just like it would in real life, because the hardware and software that's used to create the content and to display the content are tracking the physical camera's movement in front of the talent, and interacting and moving just like it would. And so there are a lot of elements to it. In its simplest form, it's just an LED wall, like you said, and a piece of content. But as you start to get down into the more technical aspects of it, you can really get deep into producing something that's Hollywood ready.
Pretty cool. So as far as the LED wall, pixel pitch, I mean, it seems like, there's
Mm-hmm.
obviously pixel pitch is always what we're talking about. Are there
Yeah.
different types of pixel pitches that you would consider for different types of applications, or are all virtual studios one pixel pitch?
No, typically it could be a wide range of pixel pitches, because the most important thing with pixel pitch isn't necessarily, I want the smallest that I could possibly get, although that's great. Obviously, the smaller you go with the pixel pitch, if you get down to the sub one or zero point 0.9, zero point 0.8, zero point 0.7, those type of pixel pitches, the price goes way up. And so what everybody's always trying to find is what's the balance between cost and what you actually need on camera. The types of things to realize is that LEDs work differently on camera than they do with your naked eye. So when you're viewing an LED wall, you're not necessarily picking up on the same nuances that a camera will, because a camera is much less forgiving with what it's seeing. Your eye has a tendency to blur things a little bit better. It can't make out really fine details from, sometimes from far away, sometimes from really close, depending on your eyesight and so many different things. But a camera, there's no fudging. I mean, the camera picks up on every little detail. And so that's when you start to run into situations like the moire effects, kind of like you've seen forever with people who wear pinstripe suits on camera, and you start to get wavy lines on their suits. The same type of thing happens with LED. And so when the pixel pitch is too large, it's basically creating a black space grid for the camera to pick up on, because the pixel pitch basically just means that the LEDs themselves are farther apart. So when you get to like a 2 and a 3 millimeter, they're just further and further apart. And if the camera can pick up on that grid in between the individual LEDs, then it'll create those wavy patterns and textures that you don't want. And so really you're just trying to figure out at what distance will you be shooting the camera at, in most cases. What's the focal length, that sort of thing. Because you don't ever really want the camera to pick up exactly the pixels themselves for obvious reasons. One, it doesn't look great, but two, it can create that moire effect and ruin the whole image. And so it's just a balance between how big is your space, how far are your cameras away from the LED space, what are you focusing on in front of the LED space? So is your talent 10 feet away from the LED wall, or are they right up against the LED wall? All of those things determine how tight your pixel pitch needs to be in order to make a good quality final piece.
It sounds like it's room size versus application. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's all of that. It's
Okay.
room size, it's distance to camera, it's distance to talent. There are a lot of factors. The majority of them that you see, for instance, everyone references the Mandalorian. If I remember correctly, I think the Mandalorian was a 2.8 millimeter pixel pitch. And so in a lot of TV studios, we never see TV studios going that low for like broadcast television, news stations, things like that. They're usually at like a 1.5 or a 1.2 because they're a lot closer. Usually talent is sitting in front of a display or standing next to a display, and they're right up on it. But in a TV or in a movie environment, or even in an environment, where you have plenty of distance behind the person that you're shooting on camera, you can go with a higher pixel pitch because it really doesn't matter. We've seen some studio spaces go as high as 3 and 5 millimeter because the LED walls were so far back that it really didn't matter. They were focused on getting as much LED in the space as they could, and so they filled it with as much as they could, and they had plenty of distance to distance their cameras and their talent away from the LED. So the effect was the same as it would have been if it was a 1.2 millimeter and somebody was standing right in front of it.
What other things are you looking at for the LED wall itself?
So the biggest things with XR Studios, and some people are talking about it and some people aren't, but for us, the biggest challenge that we overcome is the ability to produce color perfect reproduction at low brightness, because in most of these spaces, as you can imagine, there's not a lot of extra lighting. They're not shooting these things outside. They're not shooting these things with a bunch of windows around them. So there's just not a lot of natural light coming into these spaces. And so LED walls are meant to be run, at lower brightnesses anyway for on camera, because again, the camera picks up light much better than we do. And so what looks really dim to our naked eyes will show up really bright on camera. And so, but because of that, and the way that LED works in general, because of the currents and everything that's actually driving these LEDs, if you don't use the right components, as you start to lower the brightness of your LED wall, your image starts to suffer. Everything from the worst case scenario, all the blacks and grays just disappear. and all of the other colors get sort of muddied or really flat looking, to anywhere in between. What we really focus on is providing the truest quality image at any brightness, whether it's 100% brightness of an LED wall or 1% brightness of the LED. We want the color that's reproduced to be the same exact color. If you were to shoot a meter on it, it would be the same red at 1% as it would be at 100%, because in real life, those things matter. You want your image and your colors to produce in real life ways. And if you don't do it correctly, you're doing a lot of editing in post when you shouldn't be doing any at all. And so the components that you choose for an LED wall and the LED itself, not just the diodes themselves, but the IC drivers, the other cards and control systems that are used to drive the LED itself, all of those things have to work together in the best way possible for you to get the best image.
What are the components that Neoti is providing?
We are obviously, as a manufacturer, we're focused on the LED itself, making that the best possible product that it can be. And so we typically look at it holistically. So we don't necessarily sell the same product to somebody who wants to put an LED screen in their boardroom as we would somebody who wants to put a virtual studio together in a space. And so we really work with customers and the integrators and different dealers that we work with to really understand what the space is going to be used for, how it's going to be used, and really what's important. Are they going to be running it at really low brightness all the time? And so we focus wholly on the LED. Beyond that, we do work with control systems. And so we do work with the standards Novastar and Brompton and some of the others, depending on what the client's needs are and or what they prefer. We stay fairly agnostic with that, outside of some of our own things that we're working on. But the control systems we do work with, we marry the control systems and our LED together to produce the best quality content. But what you're getting from Neoti is the LED itself. And then we'll provide the control system along with it because it just comes as part of the package. We don't make people go and find their own control systems. And they have to work together well anyway. And so we produce them at the same time in the same way. And if you choose one control system over another, the LED has to be produced in a different way so that you get the best quality product out of one or the other.
So how about mounting?
We do consult on the mounting. So it depends on the product and it depends on the installation. There's no one mount that ever seems to be perfect unless you just have a flat wall and you're saying, I just want to put this on this flat wall. We've got you covered. Generally, mounting looks different at almost every installation, especially when you're talking about studio environments or virtual studios or XR studios. Anything that's not just a flat wall mount, they can vary widely depending on what the customer needs, what the customer wants aesthetically. Is there a designer or architects involved? What do they want? And so we work with some of the big name mounting manufacturers to also produce custom mounts if needed. So we work alongside the customer to figure out exactly what they need. We don't necessarily produce them in-house. It's just not our forte.
Sure, right. So what are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing that are obviously outside broadcast, to kind of inspire some folks to think about bringing a virtual studio into their environment?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, really, it is wide open. Any corporate environment that wants to produce any kind of content is really what it amounts to.
Yeah.
Putting a virtual space doesn't have to be a huge, giant production. It could be as simple as an office space that's converted into a virtual studio, and it can be done more affordably than many people think. And so, not having to use backgrounds that you have to change out all the time, not having to have a green screen environment and pay a bunch for software editing, but being able to do a lot of it straight out of the camera is really the goal. And so when we're looking at it that way, we have one studio that previous to installing a virtual set, they were producing roughly 40 different programs out of the same studio space. And so they had set pieces for all of these different programs that they were bringing in and out and in and out of the set, and storing and everything else. And they took all of that away, put in one big LED wall for their space. And now they can produce all their content virtually and change sets at a moment's notice, which has really simplified their workflow. It's added a couple extra areas that they've had to figure out. Okay, now we need a content manager or content producer, that sort of thing. But it's really taken a lot of their space and time needs and really funneled them down into something that can be done very quickly. But really, like I said, it could be a Zoom call background, having a dedicated space for if you're in a university or in any kind of a sporting environment and you do a lot of press conferences, having a backdrop there that you could use. But LED in general obviously goes way beyond XR studios that we're talking about today. We're starting to see a lot of advancements in the control room spaces. So emergency systems, police, fire, any place, security systems that are used to using a bunch of TVs in a space, they're starting to convert those to LED as the costs have come down. We're starting to see just anywhere that you would see any kind of a traditional TV or projection system or something like that, we're starting to see convert to LED because number one, it's much brighter. Usually the colors are much better. It's more versatile from a service and support standpoint because you don't have to change the entire system. If something breaks, you can change a very small subset of that system, which can usually be done in minutes. And so the service and repair times are much easier and much quicker. And so, yeah, LED is changing a lot of spaces in a very short amount of time. I mean, even in the last 10 years, we've seen some amazing advancements in how LED is replacing everything from real pieces that people are just converting to virtual, or creating entirely new spaces, entirely new virtual surroundings, and things like that.
So tons of information, really cool topic. What would you suggest for integrators or end users that really want to learn more?
Sure. Well, obviously there's a wealth of knowledge on things like YouTube and others. Many people, it's interesting because many people that know anything about virtual productions, you talk to them, nobody got that knowledge from somewhere outside of just diving into it themselves. And so what we're trying to do internally, and as we build our library of topics and videos and training materials, is trying to produce more and more materials that kind of speak directly to this on our website, neoti.com, through our social channels and things of that nature. And then as we start producing them, we'll be pushing them out. But yeah, the internet is your friend when it comes to learning more about this, because you can talk to so many different people and they will all have different answers on what virtual studios are, what XR studio spaces are. But everybody agrees on the basics, and that's the LED, the control systems, the things like Unreal Engine, the media, graphics side of it, and the camera tracking systems. Once those are the basic core components of what makes a virtual space. And so researching who those players are in each of those spaces, there's a lot of information out there already, but there's a lot of information that's being engineered out of just ingenuity.
And I'm sure checking out your site, you've got a lot of resources there as well.
Yeah, of course.
Well, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.